So we have special guest here, Mr. Brandon B. Scoop Robinson, Bally sports analyst and longtime NBA writer. B. Scoop B. Welcome to the show.
Brother, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be on and talk some hoops, man. That segue coming in out the break was smooth.
Man, all right. So I'm gonna. This is guest choice. So do you want to start with the Lakers absolutely getting boat raced, Dame's 55, or Jokic's near triple double with 38 points, or the fact that the Brooklyn Nets were able to close out the Celtics?
That's like the doctor giving you the choice of which shot to get first when you're a kid. I'm gonna go easy first. Let's go with the Nets.
All right, so the Nets, they made easy work of the Celtics, and people are expecting them to just hand them the Eastern Conference, and I don't see it that easy. I think that the Milwaukee Bucks are focused, and this is their year to get to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Well, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because if it was easy, everybody would win a championship. So your druthers are correct in that regard. But I'll add, what makes the Bucks so special, really, it's not so much Giannis. It's the supporting cast. In addition to Giannis and Chris Middleton, Bryn Forbes has been playing good basketball. Drew Holiday has been playing good basketball. Brooke Lopez is a complimentary piece who shoots three-pointers. You got Bobby Portis. You got P.J. Tucker. I mean, you got a ton of weapons at your disposal. You don't have DiVincenzo anymore. You have Pat Connaughton, who's spelling his minutes. It's going to be a 6 to 7 game series, in my opinion, between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Brooklyn Nets. And I do think that there are some holes that the Nets do have that I think still make it a good matchup, and the Nets could still win. The Bucks could still win, but it's not going to be easy. But I'm excited to watch it because I think if the Nets are the champions that everybody believes they are, I think the hardest round is going to be round 2. If they get to the conference finals against the Sixers, I do think that the Bucks are a tune-up for the Sixers. However,
Yeah. Now to go back to the Celtics series for just a second, Kyrie Irving, he stepped on Lucky. I thought that he was dead wrong for doing that. I thought it was juvenile. I thought it was like Kyrie doing what he usually does, putting hurdles in his own way when he doesn't need it. I was like, did he forget that he did not live up to expectations with the Celtics? Did you think that too much was being made out of it on the Kyrie end? Because we already know that the fan is where he belongs.
the fan is where he belongs. I will tell you that I am. I do know Kyrie. I know his family as well. I was one of the first to, report on Kai's destination back in free agency in 2019 and about his shoulder injury last year. And what I will tell you that, folks that I've spoken with, um, they said that he hasn't felt this good since high school. And that motivated him in the sense of his time in Boston was a train wreck because he was hurt. Boston wasn't where he wanted to be when he was traded from Cleveland, and that trade was made very public, his request in Cleveland. But ultimately, his health was an issue in Boston. And I also think what he said as far as his free agency plans is, if you'll have me, I'll play. Or if you'll have me, I'll resign. And I'm paraphrasing what he said. I think that more so, Boston fans are salty with how things ended. And I think that for Kyrie Irving, it all started after Game 2 when he discussed racism in Boston, and he hopes that they can keep it, basketball related. And I think that when they were yelling "F you, Kyrie," in the stands during Games 3 and Games 4, I think that they, or rather, I think it was a tit for tat. I will tell you that I do think he was wrong for stepping on the logo, but throwing a water bottle is not punishment.
Oh, for
You can't
sure.
play. You can't play God. That's God's job. If that, or whoever you believe your higher being is, and ultimately the fan needed to be in jail and arrested. And I'll add that there were some other underlying factors with that series. I'm told there were some things that were being said behind the scenes, which caused the Nets to be extra heightened and have extra security at that game. And any little thing like that had them on edge. And I'll just tell you that Kyrie Irving is definitely not perfect. Neither are those fans. But I also do think that two wrongs don't make a right. I think it was a tit for tat, and I think that ultimately this has been going on even in his absence last year, where the fans were chanting his name and he wasn't even there. And I think that in this series, I think Kyrie played the role of Malcolm X in a way that was not appealing to that fan base in Boston, and they don't like him. And, ultimately they move on to the next round, and it's interesting. It's an interesting dichotomy. It's been that way all season.
Now on to my Lakers. I was I thought that this was probably the worst I have seen the Lakers play, maybe ever. I mean, like the worst half of basketball, and I was like, that's including the Jeremy Lin, Nick Young, Hill, like Carlos Boozer, that interview that Kobe laughed at, that 36 points. This had to be the worst half of basketball that we've seen, right?
It was horrible. It was horrible. No excuses, no ifs, ands, or buts. It was horrible. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, brother. I think the Lakers this season is a byproduct of a very shortened NBA season, the shortest turnaround for players coming back after a championship run. And to be honest with you, this is what I'll say. I feel like the Lakers this season, the way that they played, is what many thought would happen last season in year one with Frank Vogel. When Vogel first signed, and you were trying to figure out all the pieces that were going to come with it. So I actually think that I grew up in the church, and my mother used to use this saying all the time: you can't use grace for grease. You can't just slide in and think you're going to, be a winner when you haven't put the work in, or you haven't put in the work to be at your best. And I just think when you piece a team together like Anthony Davis and LeBron, who have been out for a myriad of times. I think Davis was out 36 games this season. LeBron was out about 27 games this season. You get what you get. You add Andre Drummond. Kyle Kuzma has underperformed in this series. Contavious Caldwell-Pope's been hurt. You get what you get. And I think that right now, the fact that the Lakers won a championship last year, I think that's great. I think you should be looking forward to Space Jam this summer, because the way things look now, they're in grave danger. And, the fact that Jason Kidd was favorited as head coach before Frank Vogel, some folks might get their wish, because it seems like they're not responding to Frank Vogel right now.
And you guys were on with Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, Bally sports analyst and longtime NBA writer. So let's talk about Frank Vogel for a second, because I would have called time out and yelled at the Lakers, like, stop shooting threes in the first half. In the first quarter. 11 of the first 20 shots were three-pointers, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And then how you're down 30 points. How don't you put Montrezl Harrell in? And why does Talen Horton Tucker barely play? I thought Frank Vogel had his worst game by far.
Couple things. One, I agree with you about Taylor Horton Tucker. I know in Game 1 he played about 7 minutes in Game 1, and this is a far cry from some of the things that he was doing in the regular season in Kyle Kuzma and
Yes.
LeBron James' absence. And I look also at last game with Marc Gasol. What did you sign him for? But then I take that and I raise you this. One of the biggest mistakes that the Los Angeles Lakers made last season was not giving Rondo a guaranteed 2 to 3 year deal, not paying him as his value went up in the offseason. And, sources that I spoke with during the finals last year were sharing with me, the Celtics, the Hawks, and the Clippers were really, the biggest suitors. Atlanta gave Rondo the biggest offer with, I think, a guaranteed second year, third year, and that's where he really wanted to go to all along because the Lakers weren't taking care of business. I also think one of the biggest mistakes that the Lakers made was not, or rather, JaVale McGee no longer being part of that team. Their whole identity changed because of Dwight Howard's departure, not being re-signed, and I think they're paying dividends for it now because if you really think about it, look at what Dwight Howard did in Anthony Davis's absence last year. And I'll tell you this, Dwight Howard wanted a little bit more money, but ultimately what he wanted to do was close games. And in a lot of respects, the things that he wanted to do in Los Angeles this year, had he returned, he's doing in Philadelphia now. And you're seeing Rajon Rondo be successful in Los Angeles, doing some of the same things with the Clippers that he did last year with the Lakers. And so it's kind of disappointing to see them really not truly have a chance to defend their crown. And in order for them to make it to the next round, because I just don't want to dump on the Lakers, hopefully they go to Game 7. But it's going to be difficult to not play without Anthony Davis. That's going to be very difficult, man, especially when Kuzma has not been consistent. Who's going to be the second guy to step up and get big games? It wasn't Dennis Schroeder tonight.
Oh, God. Oh, he was brutal. How do you finish with a bagel? Like you're a 20-point guy finishing with a bagel. And he turned down $80 million.
Maybe I know it's not quite midnight on the West Coast. It's 2 a.m. here. Today is National Donut Day. Maybe he was commemorating National Donut Day. 0 points.
All right, now we'll move on, and because dude, this was just absolutely brutal. But I wanted to talk about the Suns super quickly. Is that they obviously won the basketball game. Devin Booker played fantastic. Chris Paul played well until he got hurt, it seemed like, again. And Cameron Payne is just out of his mind right now. But they don't have any playoff experience aside from Chris Paul and Crowder for the most part. So do you think that will potentially hinder them from being able to close out the Lakers in Game 6?
It's going to be difficult. But I think statistically, those who win Game 5 usually close out the series. Statistically, that's what happens. Chris Paul has playoff experience, but I'll tell you something. The Suns have been on a roll, literally butter on a roll, since the bubble of last year, and you really saw them come alive in a national audience perspective, particularly with the play of Devin Booker and some of the other pieces. Monty Williams, arguably, is an NBA Coach of the Year candidate, and many people left him for dead after Game 1, and they're finding a way to get it done. I'd like to see them close, but statistically, those who win Game 5 can make it happen. We'll see. And it's not just Devin Booker. It's not just Chris Paul. It's also DeAndre Ayton. It's also Jay Crowder. Jay Crowder does have playoff experience as well. It's a collaborative effort, and they're playing like they've been playing during the regular season. It's good to see.
Yeah, and to move on to the last game of the day, you had the Portland Trailblazers fall 140 to 147 to the Denver Nuggets. And Dame Lillard put on one of the most impressive playoff performances that we've seen in a while. Set the record, 12 3-pointers, and it was 12 for 17. So it wasn't like that was great shooting, 55 points. And he didn't get any real help from anybody except for Covington. Like, what was this just a heartbreaking loss? And do you think that that will end up, causing them to lose Game 6 because of an emotional loss like this?
You look at the Nuggets, you look at the Blazers, and looking at this series, I legitimately thought that the Blazers had a chance to defeat the Nuggets, and it's Nuggets are up 3-2, but Damian Lillard needs help. He put on a prolific performance, but ultimately, he's whether they win or they lose, Lillard still needs help. Um, McCollum is cool, Melo is cool, Covington is cool, but he hasn't legitimately played with a bona fide All-Star on his level since LaMarcus Aldridge. And I know he was interviewed today, and LaMarcus, talked about how he regretted not connecting with Dame in the way that he should have. But in the off season, it's going to be very interesting. And I think if they lose, just like I think folks will start looking at Frank Vogel and his employment opportunity in Los Angeles, I think Terry Stotts will also be looked at, and also how they will be able to retain Damian Lillard. I think Dame Lillard's been loyal to Portland for a while, but ultimately, if you keep losing in the playoffs and you're in a locale that's not necessarily a desirable destination, you start to ask questions. And I'd like to see Damian Lillard stay in Portland and take them deep, but the last two seasons have been kind of disappointing. And health, player availability, and more has been to their detriment. So it's going to be interesting what happens moving forward. But let's not take anything away from the Nuggets. Jokic has been playing out of his mind without Jamal Murray, and even when Jamal Murray was there, he's playing well. And he played a good game tonight as well. And he has the help. He has a ton of help in a way that Damian Lillard doesn't have comparatively in Portland. So it's going to be interesting moving forward. But it looks like the Nuggets have the upper hand at this point.
Totally. And it, I would say that Damian Lillard is like Mike Trout. Like, we're looking at one of the greatest players, in the history of the game, and especially of this era. And he's just got, he's just a one man band. You guys, he's Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, Bally sports analyst and longtime NBA writer. Scoop B, thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Brother, thank you for the opportunity to be myself, and I like that Mike Trout reference. You know your stuff.
I appreciate it.